Hi, I'm Tom Osborne, and actually was raised as a Presbyterian, married a Baptist, and found that I was predestined to be a Methodist. And so Nancy and I and our family have been in the Methodist Church for 50 plus years now, and really appreciate the bishop giving me an opportunity to address the conference regarding Teammates Mentoring Program. Teammates started in 1991. We had 22 football players at the University of Nebraska assigned to mentor 22 7th and 8th grade boys in Lincoln Public Schools. And when it played itself out and these young guys got to be seniors in high school, we found that 21 of the 22 graduated on time, and 18 went on to college. So we were encouraged by those results and expanded the program, and today we're mentoring over 8,000 young people all across Nebraska into Iowa, and just starting now in Kansas and Wyoming. So it's grown appreciably. We're in 150 school districts, and so I think it's important that you realize that this is something that has data to prove that it does work. So we had Gallup follow our matches for a period of 5 years, and this is what they found. They found that in about 85% of the matches that attendance at school improved significantly. And it sounds like a little thing, but when attendance improves, grades improve, graduation rates improve, percentage of kids going on to college improves by almost 50%. So that's kind of a big deal. And even though Teammates is not a tutoring program, it's simply a developmental program, it has tremendous academic benefits. Secondly, we find that in about 85% of the matches that behavior improves significantly. So fewer trips to the principal's office, less classroom disruption, but along with that, less substance abuse, less teenage pregnancy, less criminal and deviant behavior. And the third thing that Gallup found was that kids who had a mentor were much more hopeful, much more optimistic about the future. And that's a big deal, because when you don't have hope in your life, you tend to fill your life with all the wrong stuff. And so seeing some light at the end of the tunnel, which a mentor can provide, is very powerful. And so the reason we started Teammates was really due to my experience over 36 years of coaching. Started back in 1962 and coached on through the 90s. And what I was beginning to see was a tremendous increase in family dysfunction. When I started coaching in 1962, we very seldom ran across a young man that we were recruiting that wasn't growing up in a family with both biological parents living under the same roof. As time went on, we began to see a graphic change. A lot more single-parent families, a lot more kids who were fatherless. And those kids, on average, were a little harder to coach, a little harder to handle. And I was spending more and more of my time with off-the-field issues and not as much time with practice schedules and actual practice time and the things that you'd think you would be doing as a coach. And so we found that the changes in the family structure are pretty remarkable. At the present time, over half of our young people are growing up without both biological parents. There are 26 million fatherless kids in our country today, about 1 out of every 3. And so those changes have been really remarkable and drastic. We also, in the late 60s, early 70s, saw the advent of the drug culture. And today, of course, different types of drugs, and now prescription drugs and even heroin, have become pervasive across our country. And then I saw a lot of the media messages, things that kids watch on TV, in movies, sometimes on the internet, sometimes video games, sometimes the music they listen to. Certainly has not been as healthy or as proactive or constructive as it was 30 or 40 years ago. So this was a very difficult time, I think, in our nation's history for a great many young people. It's probably more difficult to emerge on the other side of adolescence in a healthy manner than it ever has been in the history of our nation. So a mentor really does just 3 things. It's pretty simple. Number one, a mentor simply loves the mentee. And the word that I particularly like to use is a biblical term that I'm sure you're aware of and familiar with, and that's the Greek word agape. And so a mentor loves the mentee by willing the best for them, wanting the very best outcome, wanting them to reach their full potential. And you do that by being consistent, by showing up once a week in the school and showing them that you care and listening without judgment. And so we find that the most powerful thing, probably the greatest gift that we can give any person, is our time. Rick Warren, in his book, The Purpose-Driven Life, said this one time. He said, the most precious gift that we can give another person is our time. We sometimes think it's material possessions, money, and you can make more money, but you can't make more time. So it's probably the most precious gift that any of us can give. And by giving our time and by being consistent, you demonstrate your love for that young person. The second thing that we find is very powerful is to provide affirmation. And when I was coaching, I noticed this rather graphically. If I told a player that I believed in him, that I thought someday he had a great future, oftentimes they would begin to blossom, and often they developed into that which they had no idea they could become. And if, on the other hand, we inadvertently gave them a negative message, just maybe shook our head and walked away, tried never to do that, but if we did that, sometimes that performance would start to deteriorate and go downhill. So affirmation is really powerful, and lots of kids, for whatever reason, sometimes go long periods of time without a kind word, without an affirmation that I believe in you, I know you can do this. And so what we do, we work with Gallup, we use strength finders, and we identify strengths. And it's pretty energizing to most young people to realize that there are some things that they do better than most other people. And so we build on those strengths, and when we see those strengths in play, we affirm them, we make a big deal out of them. And we find that by focusing on strengths, we sometimes identify academic majors, courses of study which lead on to occupations. And so we find that building on strengths is critical, because most successful people build on their strengths and they don't worry a lot about their weaknesses. Sometimes we think that the only way to be successful is to shore up our weaknesses, and that's really not the case. And the third thing that a mentor does that I think is very powerful is provide a vision of what's possible, to show them a path where they can someday get a good education, or someday they can have a decent job, someday live a good life. And of course that's very energizing, and as you know, lots of kids don't think very far down the road. But a mentor, by focusing on strengths and by focusing on those things that a young person does well, can show them how it is possible to get a good college education. And we think it's very vital anymore in this society that everyone has a marketable skill. And to have a marketable skill usually means some type of post-secondary training. So along about the junior year of high school, we start showing them how they can apply to colleges, secure a Pell Grant, get teammate scholarships. We have several $1 million of scholarships which are available. And as a result, we show them how this is all very possible. So anyway, I'd like to have you, to encourage you to think a little bit about emphasizing and promoting teammates within your congregation. And you may say, well, what does this have to do with my job in the ministry? And the reason I think this may be a good fit is something that Mother Teresa said not too many years ago. She said, you know, I think, in her eyes, she said, I think probably the greatest mission field in the world is the United States. And you may wonder, well, why in the world would she say that? She spent most of her time in Calcutta, living among people who were destitute, impoverished. But I think what she was talking about was spiritual impoverishment. And at the present time, a lot of our kids do not have a lot of spiritual direction or focus. And we find that the best mentors we have are people who are spiritually grounded and come from our churches, although they many of our mentors come from other sources as well. So I think that by using this in your churches, you will add a dimension of meaning and purpose and direction to the parishioners' lives. And I think it also energizes the church, because we're really called to not just sit in our pews, but to be active in the community. And this is certainly an outreach that I think strengthens not only the individual mentor, the individual parishioner, but also strengthens the church. So we would appreciate your cooperation. We'll have some breakout sessions in which we'll have some people talk to you more in depth about teammates, and hope that you'll attend those. And thank you for listening.